Let us understand how bucketing works within SparkSQL. Bucketing goes along with the partition. As we discussed earlier, partition is based on the values within the column, and I'll be having one partition per unique value within a column. And within the partition, I can have a number of buckets. The bucketing is the way of distributing the data across n number of distributions or n number of buckets. Let us take an example for better understanding. Assume I have a dataset where I have n number of tickets raised from various states and each ticket having different status. If I do the partition based on the status, and if I have 4 unique values within the status, I would be having 4 partition. And within partition, I can do the bucketing based on the state. If I have 50 states, and if I made the number of buckets as say 5, approximately 5 states would get distributed, or based on the histogram of the distribution of the records, the states would be identified and it would be distributed within the buckets. Let us take an example. Say the first bucket, if it is having the records from the state Florida, New York and Texas, all the partitions would have the records from these states in the first partition only. So the only difference is within the buckets I can have multiple values of that specific column, and this would be very useful whenever I am doing a join between the datasets, or if I want to do a sampling, if I want to pick a sample data out of a specific dataset, I can pick one bucket that would be a very good sample of evenly distributed data, and the system would take care of how the distribution is available within the data in terms of the histogram, and accordingly it will choose the state. We don't need to mention what state should get into what bucket. We don't need to mention. All we have to mention is based on what column the bucketing needs to be done and how many buckets should exist within each partition. Let us see an example how the bucketing works within the partition. I have a table, game plays. Let me describe the table. So it has various information about what are the games played. I'm going to do the partition based on the event. So if there are 10 unique values, 10 partitions would get created. And I'm going to do the bucketing based on team ID, this particular column, team underscore ID underscore for whom this particular play was made, and I'm going to divide that into 4 buckets. And Spark is a little different, where the number of buckets or the number of files that is getting created, generally it should be equivalent to the number of buckets, but within Spark that would be equivalent to the number of buckets as well as number of tasks that executed that particular bucketing. That many number of files would get created. So whatever the case, each file will have the unique values. For example, if the records for the state Florida and New York gets into the bucket 1, within all partitions we can find the records for the state Florida and New York only in that specific bucket. So let's see how many records are available within this specific table, and select the data and create a new table by creating the partitioning and bucketing. So I'm going to create a new table called mydb underscore types dot gameplays underscore bucketing. I'm going to make the partition based on the event, and I'm going to do the bucketing based on the column team underscore ID underscore for, and I want to create 4 buckets. I'm going to select all the records from this specific table that would be the source for this specific process of creating the table game underscore plays underscore bucketing. As I have not cached the data, it's going to read the data for the first time. So it's going to take a little longer time, as the data game underscore plays is having millions of records, around 6 million records it has. So we can check, describe this specific table. So the source for this table available in this specific location. Let's browse the HDFS location. Based on the event, whatever the unique event that I have, that many number of partitions got created. So let's get into the event penalty. The penalty event, I had requested the table to get created with the 4 buckets. So within the partition event and penalty, it would create the partition. It would create the buckets, and theoretically the number of files should be equivalent to the number of buckets. But we had 12 core processor in our cluster. So 12 tasks would have got executed, and 4 multiplied by 12, it created 48 tasks, and 48 tasks worked to create these buckets, and 48 items got created. Since 12 cores were utilized, so 12 different core would have used for each of the bucket, and 48 tasks would have got triggered to create that specific bucketing within that specific partition. So in the summary, the number of bucketing files is equivalent to the multiplication of the number of task writers and the number of buckets. So in the summary, bucketing is within the partition. I'm going to divide the files based on the distribution of the values of that specific column, and the partition will be one unique value per partition, and a bucket can have multiple unique values. But whatever the case, if any value gets into the first bucket in all the partitions, that value will be available within the first bucket only.